So why are we doing timesheets? We are doing timesheets because, and here I'm going to take the example of the European Commission. They want to check the time that you spend on the project. They also want to check the time that you spend on other projects and whether those projects are also funded by the European Commission. And they want to make sure that your the time that you allocate to the project is also in line with reality. So usually it's checked by auditors. Auditors will check whether your timesheets is in line with your payroll records. I've had that experience in the past, auditors checking your calendar to see that your timesheet is in line with your calendar. So everything is possible during an audit. Normally, if somebody is full-time on a project, this person is not required to do timesheets because by definition, if he's paid full-time from the project, all his hours is going to be allocated to the project. Yeah. In all the other situation, time is actually calculated based on hours and not days, which kind of makes sense because you could be working on different projects during the same day. So usually you will see different examples during the presentation. We are talking about numbers of hours. Yeah. Timesheets can be done on paper, quote unquote, or electronically, but must contain a lot of information. The name of the employer, the name of the employee, day, month, and year, number of hours worked on the projects during the period of the timesheets, number of hours worked on other projects and activities, total number of hours worked, details of the task performed from the project. So this is the part that is usually missing, actually. It's the description of the task that has been performed. And then date and signature of the employee and date and signature of the supervisor. Yeah? So every one of those timesheets need to be signed by both parties. The Commission is suggesting that you do timesheets on a weekly basis, but actually I have never done this. I do it on a monthly basis. The main reason I do it on a monthly basis is because of the staff cost allocation that we usually do on a monthly basis as well. So it's easier to tell staff the number of hours they are supposed to work on different projects on a monthly basis and not on a weekly basis. But you could do it on a weekly basis, and the Commission is kind of recommending that you do it this way. One of the things that I already mentioned this, but one of the things that the auditor and the Commission is checking via the timesheets is whether or not specific people has worked on other EC projects than the one you are doing the timesheet for, and that there is no co-funding between EC projects. So you could have different people, the same person working on different EC projects, but you can't report the same hour to two EC projects because that would be a co-funding. There would be a co-funding issue there. We recommend that you have a policy in terms of time registration or timesheets, partly because for your new staff members, so that they understand how they need to fill it in, and also for audits, if you have audits or if the Commission is asking for your procedure, you can also make sure that the procedure follow the European Commission requirement. Okay, before I get to the rest of the presentation, I would want to look at the different kind of timesheets that I've worked in the past and just go through them so that you can see maybe some of them would give you ideas on how to improve your own timesheets. But even more interesting, I think, is looking at the shortcomings of all of those timesheets. What is not actually working fine with those timesheets? Okay. So this is a very simple, I think it's even coming from the European Commission itself. I'm just gonna put it a bit bigger, if it's possible. Zoom. Oh, this is a bit too. Okay. So here we have an example of a situation where this organization only have one EC project. So when you have to decide if this is the purpose of the timesheet in this situation is either the hours is on the project or the hours is not on the project. So it's very black and white. So you can see on this line, you have the number of hours that is on the project. And here you can see the number of hours that is not on the project. And you could potentially add several projects on this template, for example. And you can see at the top here, we have the payroll information. So days that are considered as weekend, whether or not you have taken days off and stuff like this. In which case the total number of hours for that day would be 0 working hours. Yeah. So this is, and then you have the signature of the employee and the signature of the manager. So it's very basic. It's on a monthly basis here. And then you have a total overview for the period of the project. The only real thing that is missing here is to explain, for example, if the person has worked 2 hours on the 4th of September, what was this person doing on this project for those 2 hours? So what is missing is actually, if I go back to the list from the Commission, details of the task performed from the project. So that's a good one, and I've been using it, but this is the limitation of it. Yeah, it's also one that you can really only. This is really best used in a situation where you do your timesheets after the fact, right? So at the end of the month, you have your data for the days that you have worked, like the number of hours and whether or not you have been absent. You have been absent, and then it's just a function of the during the days that you actually worked, how many hours did you actually work? Yeah. Another example. This one is also interesting. You can see the organization, the name of the person, and the information of the project. But this is a timesheet that is only used to report to one project. So one of the limitations of this is you can see some of the days of the month where there is no hours. It doesn't mean the person has not been working. It's just that we are not reporting any hours on this project. Okay. So the limitation here is that you cannot see the other projects. But the good thing about this is because you report on a daily basis, you can also, in the remarks, you can leave information about what you have been doing, which actually, in this case, we didn't put. Yeah. Date, signature. You could even have the signature of the manager, but he's the manager himself, so it's a bit difficult in this case. Another example, here you have a lot more projects. So you can see with reference to the donor, so you can see which project is an EC project and which project is not an EC project. In this case, there is actually no EC project. It's all other kind of projects. Number of hours per day. And 1 page per person per month. Yeah. So that's another example. Again, here you don't have the details of what the person has been doing, but you can see all the projects. And even when he's actually not working on a specific grant. So when it's money from core funding, the organization wanted to know more specifically what this person was doing. So here it's not only they don't see the timesheets only as a compliance thing or an EC requirement, but also a way to manage the time that this person has worked on the different objectives of the organization. Another example, maybe a bit bigger, another example where we don't limit ourselves to the level of the project, but we can actually go into more details. So for example, if you are in a situation where you have to work with work plans, you can actually mention the work plans below the project and therefore allocate the number of hours to a specific work plan. So nowadays, if you have an operating grant, it's very likely that you needed to budget number of hours or even number of days on specific work plans for the year. Well, if you want to report on work plans basis, then you can use that kind of template. It's a bit more detailed. And you can have some of the projects where you report on work plan basis and other projects where it's not necessary. Otherwise, it's very similar to other kind of timesheets we just saw. So here, this is a timesheet that we developed for a specific client, and I think this is one of the best timesheets we ever made that is directly linked with the staff cost allocation, so the budget of the organization. Behind this document is actually this document. For people that are familiar with EuroPaid or DigiDevCo, this is typically the kind of budgets you would get from that DG, where you mention the position, and the budget is based on percentage of FTE. So it's not the number of days. It's based on 10% of the equivalent of a full-time person, for example. For this position, yeah? And based on this information, we decide to spread this over the different months of the project. So you can see on this line 3, the different months of the project. And we can even know more or less the number of days the person is supposed to work on those different months. And based on the percentage, we can then tell them for this person, he needs to report the equivalent of 2 days on the project for the month of April. So we are getting from information that is coming from the budget to be able to tell people how many hours, or in this case, how many days this person is supposed to work on different projects. Here you have the budget of one project, but you can do that for all your projects, and therefore telling, for example, Peter here, he's probably on different projects. One of those projects is this project, for which you need to report 2 days. But then if you do it for all the projects that Peter is involved in, you can then tell Peter, okay, project A, you have to report 2 days. Project B, you have to report 5 days. And you can actually tell Peter at the very beginning of the year on which project he needs to spread his days for the rest of the year, right? Of course, it's changing. For example, if there are new projects and this Peter, for example, is getting involved into new projects, then the staff cost allocation is going to change. But this is one of the only systems that I have implemented where you could actually tell the staff in advance how to fill in his timesheet, or how he should actually spend his time, because hopefully the timesheet should be a good representation of the time that people are working on different projects. Yeah? From this calculator, we can then generate a timesheet. So here at the top of it, it's just information coming from the payroll records. So we can see, for example, that this person is working 7.5 hours a day. That's the working hours. Yeah, that makes 20 days. So you can manually, as an HR person, for example, add this information in, right? And it will calculate that out of 22 days, he has worked 20, and then he was on leave for 2 days. Yeah? And those 2 days, of course, we are not going to allocate any number of hours because the guy is not worked. It's not a working day. So from this information, we can then, based on the percentage that we got from the calculator, we are basically telling the staff the percentage that he needs to allocate, the percentage in terms of hours the person needs to allocate to different projects. And then he can then decide how to split those number of days or hours during the different days of the month. Yeah? So these timesheets could potentially be used as a planning tool as well. Yeah. So you could plan your different months in the future, and then at the end of the month, just checking that you stick to the plan, or you change, or you can change the number of hours. Yeah. And you have a control here that makes sure that you are respecting the percentages, and that you're also respecting the number of hours per day, yeah, that you need to allocate. And of course, you have the signature of both parties at the bottom. So the really good thing about this one is you have the list of all the projects this person is involved in, and you can use this as a planning tool and as a way to make sure that your staff allocation is matching your timesheets. Because if you have to do it, let's say that you are not telling the staff in October 2020 how to fill in his timesheets, and you end up having to do his timesheets later on for the month of October, it's going to be heavier because you will have to make sure that the timesheets match the staff cost allocation that you have booked. Yeah, you are basically doing the timesheets after the staff allocation. Yeah, so that's one of the best system I've seen, especially if you want to anticipate and give the information before people actually spend their time. But you have to do the extra work of allocating your budget, what we call the cash flow budget. So you have to work per month instead of per year. Then there is what I think is the best system ever, but this is the system that we use internally. So for people that are not aware, we are a consultancy firm, and we have to do timesheets because timesheets is the base by which we get paid, because we are being paid by the hour. But also because we are working with clients that then use those timesheets to claim money from the European Commission. So we are part of their operating grant, for example. So what we use is called Harvest. And the good thing about Harvest is that you get actually all the information that the European Commission is asking you for, but you can also use timesheets as a way to manage your own time, manage the time of your staff if you are a manager, but you one way to motivate people to actually do the timesheets is to show that it's also a management tool for themselves. So just to take an example for today, so the time we have spent today, I can select either myself. So this is myself. This is the time I spend on different tasks today. And you can see it's quite detailed. Like I spent 5 minutes on this, 31. It's because I switch tasks all the time. I should spend a bit more time on more hours on specific projects. But you can see 5 hours here, half an hour there, 3 minutes here, 8 minutes here. I can see on a weekly basis. This is minutes, huh? So we go even deeper than the number of hours. But this is a good reflection of reality. Because when you see, for example, a timesheet that is filled in 5 hours and 2.5 hours on each project, it's not a reflection of reality. I'm sorry, but the guy didn't actually spend exactly 5 hours on that project. So here it's a bit more of a reflection of reality, which means that it's a better tool for management. So as I said, for managing yourself, so I can check how much time I'm spending on different clients. If you were to implement this in your own NGO, it would be how much time you're spending on different grants. And within grant, you can also see how much time you're spending on different work plans, right? So I can also see as a manager, I can see what Yosra, my colleague, is doing. She's even recording time right now, so I can see what she's doing exactly right now, which is a bit extreme. Huh? I'm not suggesting that people should be doing this, but it's a good thing. For example, if I once in a while as a manager, I go and check what Yosra has been doing for the week, for example. I'm making sure that she is allocating the time to the right projects, for example. So it's a bit of a cleanup thing, but it's also looking at how much time she's spending on the different clients and how much time she's not spending on the different client and what she's doing when she's not working on clients. So because what you want to do as a manager, a finance manager, for example, is to make sure that as much of the time of your staff is allocated to projects. Another aspect to this, so if I go back to Yosra, I can also mention, well, she's mentioning what she's actually doing. So that's also matching one of the requirements of the commission, is actually explaining what this person has been doing during those 32 minutes, for example. Yeah. Another aspect to this is the reporting. So, for example, I worked for a client last year. I was going to be reported on the operating grant because I was a consultant. I was invoicing every month the number of hours I was working. But because of the fact that I was keeping track of my time via timesheets, at the end of the year, when the commission was asking for it, I could generate a timesheet for the whole year and telling them exactly how much time I've spent on. So if I take the example here, last year, and then I take, that was Friends of the Earth Europe, yeah. I have all the entries of the whole year. And for each entry, the time, the date, what I was doing, right? And I can generate also generate all sorts of reports from this. This is the raw data, but then you can generate number of hours per month, number of hours per week, number of hours per year. Yeah, so I was able to provide this to the European Commission, and the European Commission had nothing to say, because this is as detailed as it could be, right? So my take on this is that, of course, you can go from the most basic timesheet to the most detailed one. You can choose which one you want to use. If you want to be just compliant with the commission, you don't have to go into that level of details. If you're not going to plan to use your timesheets as a management tool, and you are just looking to be compliant with the European Commission, you don't have to use an online tool. You can use an Excel sheet, and actually the Commission can provide you the template. Usually they provide you a template that you can use. You don't have to use their template, by the way. You can, as long as you respect the minimum requirement of a timesheet as defined by the European Commission, you can develop your own timesheets. Yeah, and this is what I'm suggesting: is that you move from a situation where timesheets, staff management, yourself as the person in charge of generating the timesheets or making sure that you are compliant with your donors. You move away from looking at this as oh my God, we have to do this for the European Commission. If you don't do this, you are not going to get the rest of the money, for example, because it's usually an audit requirement as well in order to get the final tranche of money from the European Commission. Yeah, and one of the reasons it doesn't really work already this way is that it's suggesting that you can just do it at the end when you have to do it. Yeah, because it's asked by the auditor or it's asked by the European Commission. If you can move away from this and look at this as a way for yourself as an employee managing your own time. So if you, for example, you are working on 2 different projects, 50-50 for the year, you know that 50% of your time should be on project A and 50% should be on project B. If you do this and you use something like Harvest and you actually track your time real time, you can see if you are actually in practice doing 50% on project A and 50% on project B. The issue with only doing timesheets for compliance purposes or doing timesheets after the fact is that it's not a reflection of reality. So it cannot be used as a management tool because it's not the real numbers. It's just the numbers that your finance manager is asking you to put there in order for his budget to match, in order for the grant, in order to get the full amount of the grants that we have. I believe that by using something online, first of all, you are compliant, especially if you put all the details of what you're actually doing. And then the second aspect, you can start using this as a management tool. If you are not 50-50 working on your 2 projects, maybe there is a problem with the budget. Maybe your position in a specific grant has not been properly budgeted, and you need to ask for more hours. Yeah. If you have a system where you actually update the information real time, then it's also good for your financial management because you're in a situation during the year to realize that someone is actually working more on a project than he's supposed to do. So one option is to tell him just spend less time on this project. And the second option is, of course, going back to the donor and say, okay, we are making a budget amendment because we realize that actually the original budget doesn't make sense anymore. But you don't want to do this at the very end of the project when it's not possible to do it anymore. Yeah, you want to be able to see this as you go along during the year. Okay, so this is the main reason. Well, for us, it's kind of compulsory to use something like Harvest because we get paid via the system. We can issue invoices based on this information. But I think as a non-for-profit, it's a bit of the same thing. You have grants, And you have to report on the number of hours you have worked on the grants to justify the amount you're receiving from the European Commission or other funders. Yeah. Okay. So why do we do timesheets? Just to sum up, resource allocation, making sure that we allocate people in the on the right project, and people are actually spending the time on the project they're supposed to be spending their time on. Project management, managing the utilization, for example, of certain people. Certain people are more involved into the project than planned, and other people are less involved. During the project, you can then manage this kind of situation. So that's the project management side. Yeah. Performance evaluation. Are people capable of doing the work within the number of hours that is allocated to that project? Or were we too optimistic? Or do we need to get this person some training or coaching to get this person to be able to do the work within the number of hours that was allocated to him? If you are not doing timesheets, it's less obvious if somebody is if somebody is really struggling on a specific project, on a specific tasks, because you don't know how much hours this person has spent on the task or on that project. Capacity building, the same kind of, do we need to hire extra people because we realize that the workload is too high? Budgeting and forecasting. So again, if you see that people are reporting too many hours or not enough hours, then you can go back to the funder and change a budget. So that's called the forecasting. Workload balancing, making sure that, okay, if in January you have spent too many hours on a specific project, is it possible in February to compensate and reduce the number of hours you're working in February? Yeah? But for that, you need to generate reports on a monthly basis. You need to be able at the end of January to see how many hours you actually worked in January on that project. Compliance, of course. Ultimately, this is the main reason we are doing timesheets. Timesheets also help in terms of generating your payroll reports. So timesheets can be used as a way to know which days somebody has been sick, which days somebody is planning to take holidays. You can also use timesheets as a payroll tool. And of course, donor reporting, being able to match what you're reporting both on the narrative side and on the financial side. So how many hours are we reporting? How many activities are we reporting? Does that match the number of hours this person has been working? Is the financial report matching the narrative report? Or is there some discrepancies there that it doesn't add up? Yeah, we are reporting activities and we are not having hours worked on that activity, for example. So timesheet needs to be accurate, needs to be detailed. It's better if you say actually what the person has been doing. Standardized, try to stick with the same system for the whole duration of a project, for example, or a grant. It has to be in line with your payroll records and what you are reporting to your donor. Yeah, it has. The best would be to submit it monthly. As I said at the beginning, it's possible to do it weekly, but not very practical, I think. But if you do it monthly, then you have enough opportunity to then, it's a lot more useful to have this submitted monthly than on a yearly basis. Because when the year is over, you cannot change anything anymore. Yeah, and it has to be aligned with the work plans and what was in the budget. Questions?
Yes,
We have like 20 minutes for questions.
Yeah, our first question comes from Paula.
Okay.
She's asking if the Secretary General can sign his own timesheet on his own.
You can have. I have seen situation where it's the president of the board, the chairman of the board, who is as a kind of manager, who is signing on it. I have seen situation where the Secretary General is signing both as the employee and as the manager. And I have seen situation where he only signs as an employee and doesn't sign as a manager. I don't think this is a big issue, because everyone realizes that if you're the Secretary General, you sign for yourself. Yeah.
Okay. We have also a question from Anna. She's asking, when we are using Excel or when using Excel timesheets,
yeah,
how do you go about signing it? Do you print it every month and have employees sign them, or would there be a way of doing it?
So I think actually the coronavirus has changed this a bit, because during the coronavirus situation, people were not there to sign documents, and so a lot of organizations moved to electronic signature, where you use something like I don't remember the name of a DocuSign, something like this, to validate the signature. Yeah. Some organization also just copy paste the signature, but I would not recommend this. The key with the signature is also one of the aspects of doing timesheets every month is that if somebody is leaving the organization, we have the signature. Yeah. If you do the timesheets at the end of the year and the person is no longer there, he cannot really sign his timesheets anymore. So the key here is to have people around to be able to sign the documents. Then how you sign it, you can do it the old-fashioned way, or you can use something like DocuSign. It's easier DocuSign really, but it's also, I don't know if it's you have to pay for it or not. Maybe not as a non-for-profit, but so I would advise DocuSign if you can afford it.
I see Anna raising her hand.
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to just to clarify. So if you do use an Excel, would you be able to use DocuSign on an active Excel, or would you have to convert it into a PDF? And
you have to convert it as a PDF.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
And then you get the PDF signed.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, that's how it works. Next. You are on mute. Yes.
So our next question comes from Victoria. She says that a previous finance manager gave her the information that only full days could be reported to a dedicated project. But I see, and I'm quoting, but I see you divided the day within projects. How does it work then?
I mean, normally you're supposed to do it on a number of hours basis. So the commission is not, the principle is that you probably are not going to spend your whole day on one project. So again, your system needs to be a reflection of reality. If you're going to spend, I personally spend my day over 5 or 6 projects, right? So I'm not going to report on one project. It doesn't really make sense. But there are people, we discussed the fact that if you are 100% on the grant, you're supposed to spend, in terms of money, you're supposed to spend 100% of your time on the grant. In those situations, for example, you could potentially report on a number of days, but I mean, normally it's on there is nothing that makes it not possible to report on an hourly basis. So I don't know where the information from your previous finance manager is coming from. Yosra?
Okay, so when you were showing your timesheet and mine, and asked how long does it take you to register your time every day?
Okay, so we have something like this. So that's an app that you have on your computer. So actually, recording your time is done by this system. So you don't have to have the page open and do it. Well, you could do it that way, but usually people do it this way. I don't want to go too much into details here because this is linked with our work management tool. And not everyone here is gonna have experience using a to-do list, online to-do list and stuff like this. But this, just to say that in our cases, it's coming from the work management tool. So we have a list of to-dos for the day, and then from that list, we go through the list and we record from that list. So you see here in orange. This is not something that we typed there, but we typed it in our to-do list. So how much time does it take? I mean, Yosra, probably maybe total 5 minutes a day or something. I don't know.
Not even.
It's always the same tasks coming back. Even during the day, I start doing some stuff in the morning and then I stop and then I go back to that task in the afternoon. So I just take the task back from before during the same day. So if you're not doing too many different things or working in of course, if for example, finance manager, they might have to deal with 6 or 7 different grants, right? In which case, of course, it's going to take a bit more time because you have to switch from one grant to another on the same day. But I think a lot of people, if you have an operating grant, I think there will be a lot of people who would actually be 100% on the grant already. So those people, they can just, it's going to take literally 10 seconds at the end of the day to just, I started at 9, I finished at 6, and the whole time I worked only on one project. It's a lot easier, of course. If you have to switch from one project to another, so more the situation that we are under, me and Yosra, we are just based on the emails we received and stuff, we will work on client A, B, C, D. This takes, probably 5 minutes. I think if you want to be that detailed, you have to use one of those online tools. You can't do that on Excel because Excel will take you more time for sure. Yeah, so I hope it answered a bit the question.
Okay, he gave you a thumbs up. So next question comes from Rebecca. Her question is, what to charge to a project? Our project officers work directly on projects but there is also a lot of organizational time, such as attending all staff meetings, team building, inputting into organizational strategy and planning. Also a flagship event, which requires everyone at the organization to be present.
Yes, it depends on your funding structure. So if you are in a situation where your projects are not a big part of your funding, and most of your funding is coming from membership fee or donation or something that would be core funding for which you don't have to report because it's money that people just give you. If you are in that situation, you can just create I call that core funding. you can just create a task or a project that is just core funding, right? So that would be the easy part. Now, if projects are nearly all your funding, but of course you're not always working on projects, yeah? You have indirect, what we call indirect allocation, right? So let's say that 90% of your income is coming from project, and then 10 is coming from core funding, right? In those situations, you have to be able to allocate a lot of hours that were not actually directly related to the grant to those grants, because that's your source of funding, right? If you don't do it, you don't have enough money, right? So that's where you have to think about allocating that tranche of hours or that tranche of money to those projects. So you have this indirect cost on EC project, for example. You can have operating grants. You can try to put those times or those people, for example, the director is going to spend. Usually, the director is not spending a lot of time on projects because he has other stuff to do, right? So the time that you can just work from this situation with the director doesn't mean that the director cannot be put on those projects in the budget, but you have to justify the amount of time. So what I usually do is that I look at, for example, if the organization is financed by 5 projects, and let's say that they are more or less the same size, so 20% for each project, then I would try to put the director 20% of his time on each project in the budget stage, right? And I won't be justifying as saying that the director is going to spend 20% of his time on the project, but because this is how the organization functions, right? Because you are 20% of our source of funding, you should be covering the indirect cost, and I would say the director is an indirect cost with the same proportion. The same logic goes for overhead cost. Yeah. So if you have the rent of the office, you can say, I'm talking about operating European Commission grants here. You could say the rent is an indirect cost and should be paid by the 7% indirect cost, right? Or you can say this grant is 20% of my budget, so 20% of my rent cost could be allocated to this project, and I justify it as you are 20% of the funding. You are funding this organization for 20%, so you should cover 20% of the rent cost. Yeah. So it's a bit of the same logic for staff cost. Yeah. So you, in both ways, in terms of timesheets, you would report it as core funding. But if you want to report that money to the donor, you have to use an indirect allocation of that money to the funder. So we are more into finance here. But this is how you manage to cover for your finance, your finance manager. It's a lot easier for the finance. Well, it's easier to justify 2 months of a finance manager on a project because he might actually spend 2 months on the project. But for example, HR person, IT person, some of the comms, those people will spend a lot of their time on core work, not on specific projects. Yeah. So in those cases, this is the 2 way you can try to cover those costs. I hope it's answer more or less the question. Yosra?
Rebecca, does that answer your question?
Yeah,
we don't hear you. We don't hear you.
Okay, you can write it if there are more questions. Yasra?
Okay, I have another question from Victoria. She's asking you if you could recommend, if you do recommend to spread all of the staff costs among the projects, or if you suggest to allocate a certain part to general administration.
As a principle, it depends a bit on your funding situation, right? But as a principle, you would want to have as much of your cost covered by projects. Anas, you're on mute. Okay. He's talking to somebody else. As much of your costs needs to be covered by your project, because so the principle of an NGO is that you try to have a positive result at the end of the year. I mean, in terms of financial sustainability. And the only way you can have a positive result as an NGO is to have some income that is not related to projects that you are not spending by the end of the year. So by that definition, you want as much of your cost as possible covered by your projects, because then you save up as much as possible from your core funding, and this can be used to build your reserve and cover, you know, a bad situation for the organization in the future if you need to have a reserve at some point. Because we know non-for-profits, you will have good years and you will have bad years, yeah. And how you survive the bad years in terms of fundraising is by building your reserve, yeah. And you're not building your reserve by having grants from the European Commission. That's not. They are not going to give you money for your reserve. Okay, I hope I answer more or less the question. Yosra?
Okay, if that does answer your question, Victoria, we can move on to the next question, which also comes from Rebecca. She's saying, I consider, this was before you answered her previous question, by the way. She's saying, I consider that the project officer's participation in some of these organizational tasks delivers value to the project and therefore is part of the project, but I'm getting pushback.
Pushback by whom? Like internally pushback of putting those time into projects?
She's nodding yes.
I think it's a question of who is pushing back, the project manager? Yeah, okay. I think it's a question of actually explaining how this works. That I think people needs to understand how their salaries is covered. So as I was explaining to the previous about the indirect cost, and hopefully most of the hours you're going to put on a project is the direct work on the project, right? But you have to explain to them that it's also possible that some of the work that is not directly linked to the project is indirectly linked to the project and should therefore be reported on the project. And if there is pushback, you maybe show them what it means not to put that cost on the project, because they might not realize what it means. And I think the most important thing about this is looking at this at the conception of the grant and at the budget conception phase. That people, when they put the number of days or hours they're going to work, they think they're going to work on the project, and therefore how much we are asking in terms of budget. It's not only a reflection of the direct number of hours this person is going to work, but also making sure that this person is covered. Because if you have the money, I think you will have less pushback. I think if you have pushback, it's because people didn't think that this time would be allocated to the project, and they realize they don't have enough money. Yeah. So the only way you fix this is by explaining at the very beginning and making sure that you budget properly. So if you're aiming to cover 20% of time of this person on the project, because this is the 20% you need to fundraise for, yeah. This is not only going to be the time he's spending directly on the project, but also a bit of the rest, yeah. And you should be happy with this. But I think you have to deal with this at the budget stage. Of course, when later on, if there is no budget and stuff, then they will complain, of course. But yeah, it's a question of making sure people understand the budget at the very beginning and making sure that it's done properly.
Okay, our next question comes from Victoria. She's asking, what is the monthly cost of the program that you introduced to register working time per project? I think she's mentioning Harvest. You're referring to Harvest.
It's €8 per person per month, and that includes the charity discount.
Does that answer your question, Victoria?
And depending on the organization, if you're a really big organization, you probably can ask for a reduction, an extra discount. I'm assuming you are between I don't know, 5 and 15 people, or something like this. Okay, Yosra.
Okay, our next question comes from Anna. When using online timesheet tracking system, how does the signing part work once it has been approved by the manager? Is an electronic signature inserted automatically, or does the mention of approval suffice from the perspective of the auditor?
Okay, that's a good question. One of the good aspects about doing this online, of course, is the approval aspect to this. So I don't think we do that with Yosra, but I was doing it with Laetitia, which was a previous consultant of mine. She would fill in timesheets during the month, and then there would be an email generated to me as a manager to approve. So this is the pending approval here, to approve her timesheets. So I could check if her timesheets were not correct or not what I was looking for. I couldn't change her own timesheets, but I could ask her to go back and change her timesheets. Yeah. So that's the approval stage. So that's a system built into the online system. And then if the stuff is approved, you take the timesheets. You can generate the timesheets via the reporting section, as I showed you for Friends of the Earth last year, for example. And I could sign it at the bottom, and the director can sign it for approval at the bottom. Yeah? But it's a reflection that during the week and during the month, there was an online approval in the system anyway. Huh? So you can set this up.